Okay, so today we're doing this one. New question, new topic, new day. So let's read the question. Lender met borrower on the street, demanded that borrower pay a debt owed to lender, and threatened to punch borrower in the nose. Okay, a fight ensued between them. Man came man man came upon the scene just as lender was about to kick borrower in the head. Noting that Lender was getting the better of the fight, Man pointed a gun at Lender and said, "Stop, or I'll shoot." If Lender asserts a claim against Man based on assault, will Lender prevail? Okay, so um, this is a torts question. The reason I know that is because, one, from reading the question, we see two things at the very last, at the call in the call of the question. So we see the word assault, which immediately should make you think, okay, either this is crim law or torts, right? Because assault is in both. But something else that it says is that if lender asserts a claim, in other words, there's going to be plaintiff lender versus defendant man, which means that this is not going to be a criminal case. This is going to be a torts case. So we should think about it in torts. Um, for this question, it's not super important, but it's, just for practice, it's a good idea to get those distinctions. So, just so we have it highlighted. Oh, oops, that's okay. So so we see assault. We know that it's either torts or um, crim law. And then let me make this straight. And we also see that lender is. Oh, no, come on, hold on. This one, right? Oh, that's big. Okay, well, lender is asserting a claim against man. Okay, so it's lender against man. Lender is the guy on the ground, or excuse me, lender is the guy who's um, about to kick the guy on the ground. Okay, and man is some guy happened to show up, saw what was going on, pulled out his gun, and he's trying saying, "Stop! I'll shoot." Okay, so let's think about what Lender's gonna say. Lender's gonna say, "Hey, well, I'm just here, you know, in this altercation, I guess, against borrower, and all of a sudden, this guy, man, is out here pointing a gun at me, telling me to stop or I'm gonna shoot." And let's think about the definition for assault. So, assault occurs when a defendant causes reasonable apprehension of harmful or offensive contact with the plaintiff's person. So, in this case, you know, um, what does that mean? What happened as to assault? So, Lander's going to say, well, in tort law, um, there needs to be an intentional action. And in this case, man saw that lender was about to kick borrower, so he intentionally pulled out the gun, aimed it, and said, "Stop or I'll shoot." So we have an intentional action. Is there a reasonable apprehension? Well, yeah. I mean, lender saw that the guy was pointing the gun at him. Lender heard him say, "Stop or I'll shoot." So yeah, there's a reasonable apprehension, but is he reasonably apprehending a harmful or offensive contact with his person? Well, yeah, getting shot is harmful contact. So, okay, it seems like lender has at least a prima facie case of assault, but you know, what is man gonna say? Well, man's gonna say, well, hey, I just was minding my own business and I saw that this guy lender was about to kick this other guy, borrower, in the head. And, kicking somebody in the head kind of, that could cause some serious damage. And in the right circumstances, something like that might even kill somebody. So, he's going to say, well, hey, I used the force that I thought was reasonably necessary to prevent harm from happening to a borrower. Oh, okay. Well, here's the thing, right? So man isn't defending himself; he's defending borrower. And for the court to analyze whether the force used was reasonable, the court's going to look at whether or not what the force was that borrower had that would have been reasonable to defend himself in this situation. So in this case, we saw that at the beginning, um, lender and borrower met together, and lender was the one who threatened to punch borrower in the face, which means, or at least what man is going to say is that, well, hey, this lender guy was the instigator of the fight, and so from the very beginning, borrower would have been the one defending himself. Well, okay, but the next sentence, what lender will probably say is, well, hey, a fight ensued between them. It doesn't say that I started the fight, even if he threatened to punch them. When things escalated above from force into fight, the facts do not specifically say that this person started the fight. This means that both of them consented to be in the fight, and therefore, you know, um, man coming over and pulling out the gun, that's way too excessive, and therefore he should recover for assault. But the thing is, you know, man is going to come back and say, well, hey, you were just about to kick this guy in the head, and, punching someone in the nose as he's going to say that punching someone in the nose is one thing, or threatening to punch someone in the nose, and getting into a fight even is another thing. But kicking someone in the head, that's an escalation um, that can cause some serious harm. And so, actually, in this case, in order, if borrower, happened to have had a gun himself and he was the one who pulled it out, he would have nonetheless been justified in doing so um, because he was stopping himself, or he was stopping, or well, the intention would have been to stop this potentially, lethal. Uh, I was gonna say lethal damage, but that doesn't quite sound right. Lethal damage. You know what I'm trying to say though, right? Like a kick in the head can kill you, and therefore, by pulling out a gun, which can also kill you, the force would be deemed reasonable. He wasn't escalating things. He wasn't using force beyond um, what was being threatened against him. Okay, so if the court does find that borrower was in a position where he could have pulled out the gun, or where he could have used threat of deadly force, rather, let's say, then in that case, when man came along and when man used the threat of deadly force, the court's going to find that was reasonable. And therefore, even though lender does have a prima facie case for assault, lender yeah, even though lender does have a prima facie case for assault against man, man is not going to be found liable because of the defense of others. Okay, so let's look at the answer choices then, and let's see what we got. So A says yes because man threatened to use deadly force. Okay, well, is that a reason um, why lender would recover? Well, no. Using deadly force itself doesn't meet the definition that we said, right? Intentionally causing reasonable apprehension of imminent harmful or offensive contact with the plaintiff's person. Well, you know, the deadly force, he could have threatened deadly force, and lender could have just like not seen him, not heard him. That wouldn't make him liable for assault. So that alone is not going to be the reason um, why lender would be, or why man would be liable. He could use deadly force, and like we said, it could have been deemed reasonable. So in which case he wouldn't be liable. So therefore, A is not the answer. So yes, unless man was related to borrower. So um, you know, when it comes to assault, relation has no. The relation plays zero factors here. I think the reason why this is one of the answers to the question is because there's a third party involved. And what's another tort where there's a special rule regarding relationships and third parties in torts? That is IIED and NIED. if there's a third party who witnesses something traumatic happening to their loved one of the factors, at least under common law, is that the third party has to be a family member. But, we're not talking about those, so that's not relevant here. So B is wrong too. Okay, well, what about C? No, if it is apparent that lender was about to inflict serious bodily harm upon borrower. Well, okay, that sounds like what we said. Um, right? It doesn't exactly say defense of others, but it says that man is not going to be liable because man would have used that level of force in response to lender about to inflict serious bodily harm on borrower. Okay, well, that seems reasonable, but what about D? So, no, because lender was the original aggressor by threatening borrower with a battery. Well, okay, that sort of plays on the rules of assault and battery. So, because the idea that we're talking about here is defense of others and defense of self, this answer choice brings up the idea of the initial aggressor. And the initial aggressor is important because, you know, um, if if lender is now coming to court suing for assault, um, then one thing that this at least this answer choice is saying is that borrower could just say, well, hey, you know, you were the one who started all this. In other words, you consented to this, which is, if you remember from your defenses from conditional, or excuse me, if you remember from your defenses to intentional torts, then you know that consent is one of the defenses. And so if you started this, well, of course you consent to this. But here's the thing, and this goes exactly to the issue that we're talking about here in the question. Even if you are the initial aggressor, you still can sue for assault um, if you uh, if you back off. There are two different ways you can do it. Number one, and this is not what happened here, but just to give you an idea, is if you back off or try to stop the fight and the other person, you say you're in a fist fight and you're with each other, you push the guy off and you start to walk away, right? And the other guy still comes at you. Well, hey, then you could file a claim. It doesn't mean you're going to win, but it means that you can file a claim and have at least, some debatable thing. Um, but that's not what happened here, right? The other option is that you did start the fight and you started it in a certain way, but the other person escalated things, to a level that was beyond what you had started. An example is actually right here, right? You start with just a normal fist fight, which, is some level of force, but then the other person, in this case man, shows up and pulls out a gun, right? And, as dangerous as a fist fight can be, pulling out a gun definitely raises the stakes. Um, but, this answer choice doesn't work for a couple reasons. Number one is that um, because lender was about to kick borrower in the head, it's a lot more likely that the court's going to find that um, actually, even though the fight had started as just a fight, the fight had already escalated to the point where serious injury or even death was a thing. So borrower would have been authorized to also escalate things from just a fist fight to, something that could cause serious damage. And if borrower was allowed to do that, then man, being the third party arguing defense of others, would have the same permission to do that too. So therefore, lender being the initial aggressor is not going to be why his claim would fail. Rather, his claim would fail because um, he was because his claim would fail if the court found that it was apparent that he was about to inflict serious harm upon borrower, because that would authorize the use of the gun to be deemed a reasonable force. So that means that the answer has to be C. That no, if it was apparent that lender was about to inflict serious bodily harm upon borrower.